the problem I think a lot of voters had is like they didn't even know if it was her. We didn't even know if Biden was president. We didn't even know if these were her talking points. And we felt that over the last 4 elections, Democrats, we felt that we didn't have a say on who could be president. We talk a lot about the Republicans being autocrats and oligarchs and taking over democracy, but from the Democrat perspective, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, I felt like the Democratic Party completely removed the democratic process from its constituents. And I think they need to have some accountability of that.
No argument here.
I donated for you. I mean, I wanted you to, like, 2016, I was like, this is going to happen. This guy's going to do it. And it felt like they stole it from me. And I'll be honest, it broke my heart when you supported him.
Look, but you have, in the world that I live in, you got a choice. And I mean, a lot of people, including my wife, agree with you. But, you know, you're down to a choice. Is it going to be Hillary Clinton or is it going to be Donald Trump? Not a great choice.
But it ended up being him anyway, so why don't we burn it down?
Well, because it's easy to say burning it down means that children are not going to have, you know, food to eat, that the schools will deteriorate, people will not have health care.
I got it.
And I'm an elected official. I got to represent the people.
That's fair.
And I can't turn my back on.
But then could we not also say, if ostensibly there hasn't been a fair primary for the Democrats since 2008, are they not also a threat to democracy? Yes. We often hear.
Fair enough. That is, yeah, I'm not going to argue with that point.
Boy. So we got to talk about some black Democrats and black liberals who are pissed off with Bernie Sanders because Bernie told just a little bit of truth about the Democrat Party on the Frequent podcast with Andrew Schulz. And we have to react to Roland Martin, who is one of these black bourgeoisie Democrat individuals who's upset with Bernie for telling the truth about how toxic identity politics is to the Democrat Party, right? And again, this is a fascinating conversation because Roland's response here basically proves Bernie right. And I'm not sure if he's smart enough to realize this, but yeah, his reaction to what Bernie said basically proves that Bernie was indeed correct about some of these race actors in the Democrat Party. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
I have to ask this. I hate to interrupt you. We have a question we want to ask about what happened to you in 2016 with this Bernie Bros movement, where your followers are seeing they have a racism problem, a misogyny problem. Do you think that's a super PAC thing behind that?
That was the Democratic establishment. That was the.
Wow. Okay.
You know, that was just, they were sitting there. We had a lot of young people. We had people of color, and you know, they create this kind of myth with the help of the corporate media and all that stuff.
You know, it's kind of interesting to that note is during this election, the podcast space, which the Democrats largely avoided, they feel had some influence in the election, and they started to label us the podcast bros and said that we were sexist and we were racist and bigoted. It's almost like it's the exact same strategy to get you out of there.
Yeah, that's what the liberal elite China does. They run away. Look, again, I would hope that everybody who's watching the program is that we as a nation have got to end all forms of bigotry, right?
Yes.
That I start off as a basic assumption.
Unless it's to your close friends, right?
Yeah, whether it's racism or sexism, homophobia, or xenophobia, whatever it is. And you know, liberal Democrats talk about that all the time. And then you get to what we call identity politics.
Yeah.
That you're black, you're wonderful, you're tremendous, you're gay, you're the greatest human being on earth.
Yeah.
And rather than say, what do you stand for?
Exactly.
You're gay, that's fine, who cares?
Yeah.
But what do you stand for?
Yeah.
You know, is every gay person brilliant and wonderful and great? No, of course not. Everybody's a human being.
Yeah.
So the issue is what you stand for, which gets you back to what we discussed earlier, class politics, in the sense of which side are you on? Are you going to stand with working families? Are you going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage or not? Are you going to fight to guarantee health care to all people or not? Are you going to demand that the wealthiest people start paying their fair share of taxes or not? Those are the issues. And no one cares what color you are, you know, what your gender is, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah,
so what Bernie is doing here is that, you know, he's being a plain old regular Marxist, right? Outside of being a cultural Marxist, in a sense that, you know, he's sticking with, hey, this is economic, right, class conflict, right, instead of racial, because what the cultural Marxists have done is that they've taken Marxism and they've replaced the conflict that is basically economic or socioeconomic, and they've replaced it with woke identity politics. Okay, they made it racial, they make it about gender, they make it about who you like to sleep with, whether or not you like your genitalia. Okay, because yeah, I mean, socioeconomic status is also like identity politics technically, but again, what Bernie is talking about is a very specific form of identity politics, and Bernie is explicitly rejecting that. He's basically saying, no, that's an issue with the Democrat Party, that's an issue with the left. This idea that you're some type of, special person, or that you're a better person, or that you're a great individual based off your identity is flawed, right? And it takes away from what he sees as the real conflict, which is class-based, not race-based, right? So I want people to understand that before we get into Roland Martin's response to this.
Okay, allow me to unpack what you just heard. If there's been a blind spot of Senator Bernie Sanders for a very long time, it's on this issue of race.
No, it's actually not a blind spot, okay? And I disagree with Bernie when it comes to his socialist ideology. However, I will say that the Democrat Party smearing of him and his followers as racist, sexist bigots, simply because they don't want to support the Democrat establishment, is wrong, right? Is 100% completely wrong. And I think that's one of the reasons why Bernie's movement is as popular as it is because he doesn't really do the whole race hustling, right? He doesn't do the identity politics thing. He focuses on class, right? And I think that is, again, the biggest difference between Bernie and the establishment Democrats. Again, I have a lot of criticisms of Bernie. I think he's weak, right? I think he's part of the reason why the Democrat Party is in bad shape is, again, because he doesn't really hold them accountable when it comes to the fact that they are a threat to democracy. They don't have real democracy in their own primaries. I mean, this is why they screwed the guy over twice, okay? But, when it comes to, the race conflict stuff, I will say the one thing about Bernie is that he stays away from it. And you gotta, kind of give him some props for that. Because the whole Democrat Party is built off the race and identity conflicts.
African Americans supporting Senator Bernie Sanders, yes. Ben Jealous, Cornel West, and others. But the reality is, Bernie Sanders had a black problem. He did. Bernie Sanders could not get the black vote. Bernie Sanders...
Yeah, because he's not out here race hustling, right? That's why. You got to race hustle to get the black vote, right? Which, again, Roland thinks that this is a bad thing. And it's like, no, it's actually a good thing in the sense that Bernie doesn't have the black vote, or he's struggling to get black people on his side because he doesn't race hustle, right? And Roland thinks that's a bad thing, but no, that's actually a good thing. That's why his movement is as broad as it is, because he's not out here race hustling like a vast majority of the Democrats.
Right now, still complains about what happened in 2016 and 2020, and he's convinced that he was going to get the nomination. And then there are people who are far left progressives who believe that. I don't. Because the reality is here, America is not a far left progressive nation. It is not. We can sit here and play games all we want to, but the fact of the matter is, it's not. You're a Democrat, you're likely going to have to be a centrist or close to a centrist, because part of the problem with the Democratic Party is the tent is so big. And frankly, it's not as narrow as the Republican Party. Okay? The other thing is this here. Bernie Sanders really has a problem with what he keeps calling identity politics. Bernie Sanders sounds like a right-winger when he does. See, he keeps saying the whole deal, oh, you're black, oh, you're gay, you're great, you're amazing. Well, first of all, Bernie, there was a reason that was a song called Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. There's a reason Roberta Flack and Donna Hathaway had their song as well. There's a reason Aretha Franklin remade the song Respect after Otis Redding did it, and it actually became a women's anthem. Bernie Sanders doesn't want to deal with the reality that, yes, in this country, women, especially black women, have been grotesquely marginalized. And we know what happens to African Americans. Now I know some Bernie Sanders supporters right now say, well, Roland, wait a minute. He was riding hard with Reverend Jackson. He was working on the campaign or whatever. Yes, that's absolutely true. But it's not like Vermont does not have issues with mass incarceration. It it's not like Vermont doesn't have issues when it comes to race. See, I just want people to understand really what we're dealing with here. And I remember when this was a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I can't remember. Bernie had done an interview with GQ and was complaining, railing against these identity politics. And I remember sending a text message to the guy who ran his campaign, Jeff Weaver, who was with Our Revolution. I said, Jeff, I'm gonna tell you right now, Bernie Sanders keeps doing this, I'm gonna light his ass up. So Jeff's like, hey.
What's up with Roland Martin and his obsession with people's asses, right? Because I'm not home right now, I don't have that clip of Roland Martin saying that you got to jump in his ass, right? I don't have that famous clip, but I just think it's hilarious how this dude is so obsessed with getting those people's asses over political disagreements.
Can I set up a meeting between you and the senator? Yes, you can. So I went to Capitol Hill, and I met with him. And I told Senator Bernie Sanders to his face, I said, you keep railing against identity politics, and what you don't understand is you're speaking negatively about black people. See, Bernie's whole view is this thing is about class. Nah, bro. That is about class. You could be black and upper class, middle class, lower class, your ass still black. This is Bernie's problem. And see, Bernie Sanders doesn't want to admit that yes, Bernie bros were sexist. Some were sexist, some were racist. There's a reason why a number of former Bernie bros supporting Trump. Because what Senator Bernie Sanders represents, and I'm telling y'all, I know this, see, people need to understand why where there's a symbiotic relationship. Because Senator Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, in many ways, are the same. Tear the system down. So the people that back them are like, yo, tear this shit down. I don't give a damn. Tear it down. It's very similar language. So they identify with one another. And so the Bernie people, they're mad at Congressman Jim Clyburn. First of all, Congressman Jim Clyburn endorsed then Vice President Biden. He couldn't cast every ballot. Congressman Jim Clyburn represents one congressional district in South Carolina. He don't control the whole state. Do people respect him? Yes. Do they value his perspective? Yes. But people made individual decisions. And see, this is what Bernie Sanders and all of these other white progressives don't understand. Black people are some of the smartest political minds you will find.
Oh, really? Is that correct, Roland Martin? Right? Black people are the smartest political minds you'll find. Okay? The same black people who told Joe Biden that, hey, you have to pick Kamala Harris as your VP because she's black, right? I'm just saying that what you're seeing here, the reason why I am doing this video, okay, is because you're seeing the fractures within the Democrat Party in regards to how they're supposed to move forward, right? You have some people like Bernie that's like, hey, I want to get away from the identity politics stuff, right? Because the identity politics stuff is divisive, especially when you're talking about identity politics based off race, based off gender, sexuality, okay, whether or not you like your genitalia. Yeah, that type of stuff, toxic, right? But you have some Democrats, right? For example, people like Roland Martin, who insist that no. If you don't want to embrace racial identity politics, then you're racist, right? You're sexist, okay? You're bigot, okay? I mean, he essentially called Bernie Sanders supporters bigots and racists, white progressives, racists. Which, you know, hey, I'm not saying that may or may not be true. I'm just saying that you're seeing how the Democrat Party is so divided in regards to how to rebuild their party and how to move forward. Because you have a base of the Democrat Party that just refuses to let go of divisive identity politics, which is what lost the Democrats the election in 2024.
First is this idea that the liberal elites are levying these unfair claims of bigotry. And secondly, this idea that identity politics is devoid of utility or isn't working for us. To that first point, when we're talking about the liberal elites, whatever that means in Bernie Sanders' imagination, there's an important distinction to be made here. There is a difference between accountability and moral absolutism. One thing I think we do very, very well on the left is we hold people accountable. We do not worship our politicians. When politicians do right by us, we praise them. And when they do wrong by us, we hold their feet by the fire. And I do think that is a huge distinguishing factor between how we move on the left and how they move on the right. The right feels way more cultish to me. They fall in line, okay? And so I value that on the left, we have the ability to hold people accountable when it matters. Now, where that gets dangerous and where I sort of see where Bernie Sanders is coming from is when that veers into moral absolutism. This idea that my positionality is the absolute correct one, and anyone who doesn't fall exactly where I do in this spectrum of belief is somehow inherently wrong. That is dangerous. And I think that's where our coalition falls apart sometimes, because we opt into these carceral logics of discarding one another when someone isn't perfect. And at the end of the day, perfection is white supremacy culture. Expecting perfection is white supremacy culture. And I think that is a very, very dangerous trap that we do fall into sometimes. But that accountability piece is still there, and we do get it right a lot. And so I think it's also intellectually lazy to imply that when we hold these manosphere podcasters on the internet like Andrew Schulz accountable and call them bigoted or call out moments of bigotry, that is not true or is always false or is somehow just this liberal elite tactic.
Right? That's part of the reason why they lost. Okay? Because people are sick and tired of this type of stuff that Roland Martin is pushing and he's advocating for. Now, again, like I said, I got a lot of disagreements with Bernie Sanders, right? Ideologically. But I will say the guy is correct about, again, the issues with the Democrat Party and how they, approach voters, right? How they market themselves, and, a lot of the divisiveness that comes from their abuse of racial and identity politics in order to try to get votes, right? So again, people like Roland Martin, he think, oh, I'm so smart, right? I know how to get black people to get out and vote. But what he doesn't understand is that type of identity politics is also what turns off other people. It turns off other groups of voters who, let's be real, there are more of those voters in the United States of America than black folks, right? This is what people like Roland Martin don't realize, right? When you are the 13%, okay, of the population, you don't have that many people. So yes, you may get black people to show up and to vote more or to vote for you. But if you're turning off whites, if you're turning off Hispanics, if you're turning off Asians, if you're turning off everybody else, then it's a net loss, right? Which is exactly what happened in the 2024 election, right? Kamala Harris didn't do as well as Democrats normally do with Hispanic voters, right? And again, a lot of it has to do with the fact that, again, Democrats abuse racial identity politics way too much. But people like Roland Martin, he'll tell you, well, I'm the smartest person in the room. We're the smartest, right? We can help you win elections. We can win elections. Like, well, maybe, right? Maybe, okay? But when you talk about only having 13% of the population, I think you're overplaying your hand, right? You're definitely overplaying your hand. And I think, in situations like this, I think Bernie is more correct on this issue of the Democrats and their reliance on identity politics and how they're not really going to move forward if they continue to play this game, right? That clearly the American people are turned off by. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.